The message came through just as I was rinsing dishes, soap bubbles sliding off my hands. "Can you bring the usual tonight? I'm feeling weak again." I stared at the screen, confused. The number wasn't saved. The text wasn't for me, but it had my husband's name at the top of the thread. For a moment, I thought maybe she'd gotten the wrong contact. People make mistakes all the time. But the next line made my stomach twist. "Also, wear that gray shirt I like." The plate slipped from my hand and cracked against the sink. Water splashed, bubbles popped, and somewhere behind me, the kettle began to whistle shrill and haunting, like the start of something I didn't want to believe. That was the night everything I thought I knew about my marriage began to unravel. Before that text, life was quiet, ordinary even. Mark and I had been married for 11 years. We weren't one of those couples who finished each other's sentences or still held hands in the grocery store, but there was comfort in our rhythm. He worked long hours as an IT manager. I taught art part-time at the community center. Evenings were for takeout, TV, and casual conversations that had slowly thinned over the years, like a fabric worn too soft at the edges. We had a teenage daughter, Emily, 16, with a quick wit and eyes that reminded me of the younger version of myself. Curious, kind, a little cautious. Our home wasn't perfect, but it was safe, predictable. I thought that was enough. Mark was always dependable. The kind of man who fixed leaky faucets and made sure the car insurance was paid on time. He wasn't particularly romantic, but I never asked for much. After so many years, love wasn't in the grand gestures anymore. It was in the small things. The way he poured my coffee. The way he'd turn off the hallway light after me. Until that week, when he mentioned a new hire at work. A young analyst named Claire. He'd said it casually over dinner, spooning mashed potatoes while scrolling through emails on his phone. "She's sharp," he said. "Kind of reminds me of you when you first started teaching." I remember smiling, not thinking twice about it. It wasn't until later, when I replayed that conversation in my mind, that I noticed how his voice softened when he said her name. But back then, I didn't know. Back then, I still believed in the quiet comfort of our life. It started small, the way betrayal often does. Mark began coming home later. Not drastically, just an hour here, 30 minutes there. He'd kiss my forehead, mumble something about client issues, and disappear into the shower. He smelled different sometimes. Not of perfume, but of something unfamiliar. A faint citrus scent I didn't own. Then came the secrecy. He changed his phone password, claiming it was for work security. He started keeping his phone face down on the table. And when I asked who kept texting him during dinner, he said, "Just the team chat, nothing interesting." It's strange how intuition whispers before it screams. I told myself I was imagining things. After all, he'd never given me reason to doubt him before. I busied myself with my students, with Emily's college prep, with the mundane things that distract us from our fears. But that night, when I received that accidental text, something in me shifted. I didn't reply right away. I just stared at the message, feeling my heartbeat in my throat. I scrolled up, realizing it was a new thread. No history, no context. Just her message, addressed, by mistake, to me. "Can you bring the usual tonight? I'm feeling weak again. Also, wear that gray shirt I like." I sat down, wiping my wet hands on a dish towel, and my mind began racing. What was the usual? Medicine? Food? Maybe she really was sick. But the part about the gray shirt, that didn't sound professional. Still, I told myself there had to be an explanation. People misinterpret things. So I texted back, fingers trembling. "Hi, I think you sent this to the wrong number. Who is this?" 3 dots appeared, then vanished. A full minute passed, then another. Finally, the reply came. "Oh my God, I'm so sorry. Wrong number. My mistake." That was it. No name, no attempt to explain further. Just like that, erased. But her panic bled through those words, and I knew. She realized who she had texted. That night, I watched Mark walk through the door, smiling like nothing had changed. He kissed my cheek, smelling faintly of the same citrus scent. He was wearing that gray shirt. I didn't confront him, not that night, not the next. Instead, I waited. I smiled, cooked dinner, and tucked Emily in as though nothing was wrong. But inside, I was watching every movement, every word, every glance at his phone. Because once you suspect something, every ordinary moment feels staged. He laughed too loud at my jokes, kissed me too long before leaving for work. Even his affection began to feel like camouflage. So, I started paying attention. I memorized his routine, noticed how he left the house at 7:40 sharp, coffee in hand. I began checking his car mileage. Little things, just enough to make sense of my unease. And a week later, I got my confirmation. One afternoon, he said he had to stay late for a team review. An hour later, I drove to his office, quietly, carefully, parking across the street near the small bakery. His car wasn't there. Instead, I found it 20 minutes away, outside a small apartment complex. And parked beside it was a silver sedan, the same one I'd seen once before outside his office when he told me he was working weekends. Her car. I didn't need to see inside. I didn't need photos, because sometimes the truth doesn't shout. It hums, steady and cruel until you can't unhear it. I drove home, numb. The world felt quiet in that sharp, empty way, like the silence after glass breaks. But I wasn't going to scream. I wasn't going to beg. I was going to wait, because I wanted him to tell me himself. For the next few days, I lived inside a kind of quiet performance. Morning coffee, small talk, folded laundry, each act rehearsed, each smile deliberate. I watched Mark move through our home like a stranger wearing my husband's face. He didn't notice. Or maybe he did, but chose to believe I was still the same woman who never questioned him. It was a Thursday evening when everything shifted again. He was in the shower and his phone, usually glued to his hand, buzzed on the nightstand. The screen lit up with a preview. "I miss you already. Hope your wife doesn't suspect anything." The contact name wasn't Claire. It was saved as Dr. C. But there it was, the heart emoji. And in that single flicker of light, I felt the foundation of our life collapse in silence. I didn't open it. Not yet. Instead, I took a photo of the screen with my own phone. My hands were trembling so badly I had to steady them against the dresser. When he came out, towel draped around his shoulders, steam trailing behind him, I was sitting on the edge of the bed, pretending to scroll through emails. He smiled, that same easy, practiced smile. "You okay?" I looked at him, really looked at him. His damp hair, his soft eyes, the faint wrinkle at the corner of his mouth. The man I had shared a life with for 11 years. And I heard myself say, calmly, "You should probably text your doctor back. She sounds worried." The color drained from his face. For a second, he froze, eyes flicking toward the nightstand. "What do you mean?" he asked, too quickly. I shrugged, pretending not to care. "Your phone buzzed. Dr. C. Something about hoping your wife doesn't suspect anything." He reached for the phone, fumbling slightly. That's just a joke between coworkers," he said. "We all use nicknames. She's been sick lately. I've been helping with her reports." It was almost impressive, the speed with which he lied. I smiled, soft and measured. "Oh, that's sweet of you." And then I said nothing else, because when a liar thinks you believe him, he keeps talking. And the more they talk, the more truth leaks out through the cracks. That night, I waited until he fell asleep. His breathing was steady beside me, slow and heavy, as if guilt couldn't reach him even in dreams. I took his phone, careful not to wake him, and slipped into the bathroom. The password was simple: Emily's birthday. I almost laughed. The messages were there, waiting, like tiny knives. Her name really was Claire, and their affair, it wasn't new. It had been going on for almost 8 months. They spoke in codes, project deadlines, team reviews, late calls. But beneath the professional language were fragments of something darker, more intimate. I can still smell your cologne on me. Wish we could have breakfast together instead of sneaking around. You looked handsome in that gray shirt. My breath caught at that last one. And then, at the very bottom of the thread, one message that made me feel physically sick. If only she knew how unhappy you really are. She, that was me, the wife, the fool. I stared at those words until my vision blurred. Then I took screenshots. Every message, every call log, every timestamp. I sent them to my own email. I wasn't just a wife anymore. I was a detective. When I returned to bed, he stirred, pulling me closer in his sleep. I let him. His arm was heavy across my chest, his breath warm against my neck. I stared into the darkness and whispered to myself, "You don't even know I'm awake." The next morning, I made pancakes, his favorite. I smiled when he kissed my cheek and told him I loved him before he left for work. He smiled back, relief flickering across his face, the kind a man wears when he thinks he's safe again. But I had already made a plan. I didn't want to destroy him quietly. No, I wanted the truth to stand in the light, not just for me, but for everyone he'd fooled. His parents were coming over that weekend for his mother's birthday dinner. I decided that would be the stage. 2 days to prepare, 2 days to make sure I had everything I needed. I printed the messages, carefully placing them in an envelope labeled "Happy Birthday, Mom." Inside were not just screenshots, but proof: hotel receipts, call records, even a photo of his car parked outside her apartment, which I'd gone back to take. When the evening came, the house was spotless. The table was set with candles and flowers. Emily helped me with the decorations, humming softly, unaware of the storm that was about to break. Mark's parents arrived first, his mother carrying her famous lemon pie, his father already teasing about getting older. Then came Mark, bouquet in hand, acting like the perfect son and husband. "Smells amazing in here," he said, wrapping an arm around my waist. I smiled, leaning into him just enough for the illusion to hold. We sat down to dinner, laughter filled the room. Mark poured wine, cracked jokes. His mother looked at us with that proud, content expression only mothers have when they think their child has a good marriage. When the plates were cleared, I brought out the envelope. "This is for you, Mom," I said, setting it gently in front of her. She smiled, surprised. "Oh, sweetheart, you didn't have to." "Go on," I urged softly. "It's something Mark helped me put together." He froze, mid-sip. His eyes met mine, questioning, cautious. My heart was pounding so loud I could barely hear her peel the flap open. She pulled out the papers, unfolding the first sheet. The color drained from her face. "What is this?" she whispered. His father reached over, brows furrowed, scanning the messages. The room went still. Mark stood abruptly. "What the hell are you doing, Anna?" I looked at him, calm. "Just giving your mother a little update on how her son's been spending his evenings." He lunged forward, grabbing the papers, voice rising. "You're insane!" But his father's voice cut through the chaos. Deep, disbelieving. "Is this true, Mark?" No one spoke for a moment. Only the sound of Emily's fork dropping onto her plate echoed in the silence. And then, for the first time, I saw him break. He tried to deny it, of course, to twist the story, blame me, claim misunderstandings. But the evidence was there. Cold, undeniable, written in his own words. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I just stood there, my hands steady, my voice calm. "Don't worry," I said quietly. "You won't need to lie anymore. Everyone knows now." His mother sat frozen, tears streaming down her cheeks. His father looked at him like he was seeing him for the first time. And Mark, he just stood there, defeated, stripped of every pretense. It wasn't loud or dramatic. It was quiet, painfully quiet, the kind of silence that follows a truth too heavy to move past. After the dinner, the house felt like a stage after the curtain had dropped. Plates still on the table, candles half melted, laughter long gone. Mark's parents left first. His mother couldn't look at him, just clutched her purse and whispered, "How could you?" before walking out. His father followed in silence. Emily had locked herself in her room. I could hear muffled crying through the door. She adored her father, and now her world, our world, had been cracked open. Mark stood in the middle of the dining room, chest heaving, eyes wild. "You humiliated me in front of my parents," he spat. I was calm. Too calm, maybe. "No, Mark, you humiliated yourself. I just made sure you didn't do it behind my back anymore." He grabbed his keys from the counter, muttering, "I'm not staying here." "Then don't," I said. "Take your gray shirt and your doctor." He paused halfway out the door. "You went through my phone? You had no right?" I looked him in the eye. "You had no right to bring another woman into our marriage." He left without another word. The door slammed and the sound echoed through the empty house like a final punctuation mark. That night, I didn't sleep. I sat in the kitchen, staring at the faint ring his coffee mug had left on the counter, wondering how many mornings I'd spent wiping away the same little stains, never realizing they'd outlast the man himself. By morning, the story had spread. I hadn't told anyone, but secrets like that don't stay buried. His mother called me first, voice shaking. "I'm so sorry, Anna. We raised him better than this. If you need anything at all." I thanked her, even though I didn't know what I needed. Then the messages started, quiet ones from people at his office. Apparently, Claire hadn't shown up to work. And when she did, a few days later, she looked pale and shaken. Word had gotten out that Mark's wife had found out. The gossip spread like wildfire through the cubicles. He was called into HR within the week. The company had strict policies against interoffice relationships, especially those involving a manager and a subordinate. By Friday, he was placed on administrative leave pending investigation. I didn't feel joy. I didn't even feel vindicated. Just tired. When Emily finally came downstairs, eyes red from crying, she didn't yell or blame me. She just asked, "Is Dad coming back?" I hesitated before answering. "Not for a while, sweetheart." She nodded, small and quiet. "Good." I hadn't expected that, but then she added, "He lied to both of us, and you don't deserve that." It's strange how children can hold such clarity in moments adults can barely breathe through. The following Sunday, Mark's mother asked if we could all meet for lunch. "To talk," she said. I agreed. Maybe part of me still needed closure. We met at her house, the same house where Mark and I had celebrated countless holidays. He was already there when I arrived. He looked different, older somehow. The arrogance that used to cling to him like cologne had been replaced by something quieter, almost fragile. He didn't meet my eyes. His mother started, her voice trembling. "I don't know what to say except that I'm heartbroken for both of you." Mark finally spoke. "I made a mistake, Mom. A stupid, selfish mistake." I folded my hands in my lap, keeping my voice even. "A mistake is leaving the milk out overnight, Mark. An affair is a choice." He looked up then, guilt flickering in his eyes. "I didn't mean for it to happen. I was lonely. You were always busy with your students, and I felt unseen." I almost laughed. "So your solution was to make yourself seen by your coworker instead?" His mother interjected softly. "Anna, maybe we should—" "No, Mom," Mark cut her off, voice rising. "She needs to hear me out." I've heard enough, I said, standing. You've spent months lying to me, lying to our daughter, and lying to yourself. The only thing left to say is goodbye. He reached for my hand, but I pulled away. For years, that hand had been my comfort, steady, familiar. Now it just felt like a stranger's. I'll send the divorce papers next week, I said quietly. I don't want this uglier than it already is. And with that, I walked out. Not angrily, not dramatically, just done. The weeks that followed were slow. The house felt emptier without his things, but strangely lighter, too. I started spending my mornings on the porch with coffee, watching the neighborhood wake up. Birds, mail trucks, the sound of kids on bikes. Life still happened, even after heartbreak. Emily began opening up again. She'd sit beside me, sipping her tea, sometimes silent, sometimes venting about school or her friends. One morning she said, "You seem different, Mom. Happier." I smiled softly. Maybe I'm just breathing again. The truth was, I missed parts of him. Not the betrayal, not the lies, but the version of him that existed before the affair. The man who laughed easily, who held our baby girl and cried the first time she said Daddy. But that man was gone long before the text message ever arrived. I just hadn't noticed he'd left. One evening, as I was closing up my art studio, I got an unexpected email from Claire. The subject line read, "I owe you an apology." I hesitated before opening it. Her message was brief, almost trembling through the words. I never meant for it to go this far. I was sick, not physically, but emotionally. He told me things that made me believe you two were already over. I know that doesn't excuse it, but I'm truly sorry. I ended things. I'm leaving the company. I stared at the screen for a long time. I didn't reply. Some things don't need closure. They just need to end. Still, that night, as I watched the rain trickle down the window, I realized something important. Revenge wasn't the highlight of my story. Peace was. I didn't win by exposing him. I won by walking away with my dignity intact. People think betrayal destroys you, and maybe it does, at first, but sometimes it just clears the ground for something new to grow. 6 months later, the divorce was finalized. No courtroom battles, no shouting, no theatrics, just signatures on paper that once symbolized a promise. Mark moved out of state for a new job. I didn't ask where. Emily chose to stay with me, though he called her occasionally. She was polite, but distant, the kind of polite that hides hurt behind carefully measured words. Sometimes, late at night, I'd still think about that first message, that one accidental text that changed everything. It's strange, isn't it, how a single moment can divide your life into before and after. Before, I was a wife. After, I was a woman learning how to exist on her own again. I started rebuilding piece by piece. My art classes grew. Word spread about the community workshops I ran, and soon I was teaching women twice my class size, many of them telling me their own stories between brush strokes and coffee breaks. One day, after class, a woman stayed behind. Her name was Janet. She was in her 50s, soft-spoken, with kind eyes. "I heard about what happened," she said gently. "My husband cheated too, 20 years ago. I thought it would break me, but now I think it set me free." I smiled at that because I understood. Freedom doesn't always come the way we imagine. Sometimes it walks in disguised as loss. The first time I truly felt like myself again was on Emily's 17th birthday. We were in the kitchen, icing a cake together. The radio played some old pop song we both pretended not to like, but sang anyway. Halfway through, she looked at me and said, "You're glowing, Mom." I laughed. "That's just the buttercream." She shook her head. "No, it's you. You look happy." And she was right. For the first time in a long time, I wasn't pretending. Later that night, when the candles flickered and she made her wish, I caught myself whispering one of my own. Not for revenge or closure, but for peace. Peace with the past, peace with the choices that led me here, peace with myself. A few weeks later, I ran into Mark's mother at the grocery store. She hesitated before approaching me, clutching a carton of milk like she needed something to hold on to. "Anna," she said softly, "I just wanted to say thank you for handling everything with grace. You didn't have to, but you did." I smiled. It wasn't grace, really, just exhaustion. She chuckled sadly. "Maybe, but still, thank you." Then, after a pause, she added, "He's not doing well. Lost the job, drinking too much. I worry about him." I nodded, feeling a faint ache of old compassion. "I don't hate him, you know. I just can't save him anymore." She looked at me for a long moment, then reached out, squeezing my hand. "You already did once. That's enough." As she walked away, I realized something I hadn't before. Forgiveness isn't about letting someone back in. It's about letting yourself move on. By the end of that year, I had transformed our old guest room into a small studio. Paints, canvases, sunlight pouring in through open curtains. It smelled of turpentine and lavender. My hands were always stained with color, but I liked it that way. It felt alive. One afternoon, as I cleaned my brushes, Emily came in with 2 cups of tea. "You know," she said, "you could sell these paintings online. People would love them." I laughed. I wouldn't know where to start. "I'll help you," she said, eyes bright. "Let's do it together." And so we did. Within weeks, our small online shop had its first sale, a painting titled "The Gray Shirt." A quiet piece, a woman standing at a sink, a phone glowing beside her, the beginning of her ending, and her beginning again. It sold to someone in another state, but I didn't need to know where it went, because that painting had already done its job. It told my story, so I didn't have to keep telling it. Sometimes I still get messages from people who've heard fragments of my story through friends or through my art workshops. They always ask the same thing. How did you stay so calm? And the truth is, I wasn't calm. I was broken, scared, angry. But calmness isn't the absence of pain. It's the choice not to let pain speak louder than your dignity. If that text had never been sent, maybe I would have kept living in a quiet lie, thinking everything was fine. Maybe I'd still be setting 2 plates for dinner and wondering why his eyes didn't meet mine anymore. But instead, I got a chance to start over, to rebuild my life on honesty, even if it came at a terrible cost. And you know what? Sometimes the truth doesn't ruin your life. Sometimes it saves it. I don't hate my ex-husband. I pity the part of him that thought love was something you could hide behind locked phones and half-truths. Because love, real love, doesn't live in secrecy. It lives in the open where it can breathe. I've learned that betrayal doesn't have to end your story. It can simply begin a better chapter, one where you finally belong to yourself again. Would I have preferred not to know? Maybe, but I'd rather face a painful truth than live inside a beautiful lie. So I'll ask you this, my friends. If a single message revealed the truth about the person you love, would you want to read it? Tell me in the comments. And if my story reminded you that strength can be quiet, don't forget to subscribe for more stories like this one. Because sometimes it's not the betrayal that defines us. It's what we choose to do after.